You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. I'm joined by Australian film director Daniel Armstrong. Thank you for joining us, Daniel.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Look, it's really great to chat with you, mainly because, as avid listeners of Surgeons of Horror know, I'm a big advocate of Australian genre movies in itself, and it's good to have somebody who's actually working in the scene at the moment to discuss your films. But before we kind of get to that, I mean, your work's probably been closely associated with the term neo-pulp. And I just want to get you to describe that to anyone who may not be familiar with that term, but more importantly, I guess, what that means to you, that term.
Sure. That's from a while ago. That came from a friend of mine, Les Morris, who started sort of trying to find a way to describe the films that like I do and some other people do in a way that sounded interesting. So neo-pulp is really about like it comes from the pulp fiction kind of term. They used to have pulp novels, which are largely sci-fi, although it's had some crazy super science in them, and like they could be horror as well. But like grabbing those kind of schlocky B-movie ideas and sticking them in a more modern kind of storytelling context, where you've got a bit more of a character arc, and you take some of the story. I'm not going to say you take it seriously, because anyone who's seen one of my films know they pretty much relentlessly don't take themselves seriously. Yeah. But it's but they're not a spoof. So, for instance, of horror, it's like a neo-pulp kind of horror. So there's these pulp fiction kind of characters and pulp fiction kind of worlds, but like you stick a character arc in there, and it's got a story structure and that sort of stuff, which is the neo section. So yeah, that's from a while ago. That's right. I used to talk about that. I can't remember when I talked about that, but it was a little term that we decided was going to describe our films. So I describe them differently now. I call them splatstick now. Which I think is splatstick, like slapstick, but with some splat, so it's a little easier to understand.
I can identify with that. I think both of them work, but I guess out of that though, I mean, it's obvious I say obvious, but when you watch your movies, you can see the key influences that are embedded throughout it. But would you mind just kind of having a chat with us about who have been your key influences, and you know, not necessarily what have been your key influences?
I think honestly, it's probably this may not be so obvious in the films, but it's probably like Douglas Adams and the Goodies. Yeah. And watching really early Doctor, like when I was growing up, it was the sort of Tom Baker era of Doctor Who, which actually had a hell of a lot of comedy in it, and there was a lot of those stories written by Tarnation. Yes. So it's that, and you know, Red Dwarf is another one I watch a lot. So I feel like that's the major influence, which is my sense of humour. Yeah. Cinematically, I suppose you are looking at like Evil Dead and Sam Raimi and a whole lot of. I'm really bad at remembering directors' names, because when I was a kid, I didn't care. I didn't really think of films as things that were made by people. Yeah. I just got them and watched them, and you know, they were just sort of magical little worlds. So like, I used to go when video stores first appeared. I used to go down and like, you know, 10 for $10, and if the cover looked good, you'd grab it and watch it. So like, influenced by a whole range of those kind of, you know, particularly sci-fi more than horror, to be honest. But they were sort of the same section in the video store, the sci-fi horror, and all these movies that I don't even read about, like in Starlog or Fangoria magazine, because they were never on at the cinemas here, or I was too little to see them or whatever. So I used to just collect them up and watch them. So it's a mishmash of like reading a lot of Douglas Adams and watching Fawlty Towers and watching the Goodies, and then watching a whole lot of like really, really cheap bad movies on VHS, which are awesome. So like, I think that's where it comes from. Yeah, look, there's a definite market for that though too. Like, you know, and more so. I mean, I was kind of reminded of the old kind of Linnea Quigley movies. We chatted with her fairly recently. All those kind of like movies that kind of very much tongue in cheek in their storytelling, but lots of blood, lots of kind of gore, and you know, just you know, you can imagine just kind of engulfing a large box of popcorn in the sitting, you know, and just enjoying every moment of it. So look, I know, just you talking about Doctor Who and the Goodies as well. Like, there's one of our fellow podcasters he's our kind of sci-fi guru guy. He distinctly remembers watching the
the horror of Fang Rock.
Yeah.
But it coincided with the Australian broadcast. It coincided with an episode of The Goodies as well. Both were set in a lighthouse. They had a sketch
in the
lighthouse sketch with the Goodies, and he somehow, in his young mind, merged these two worlds together. And he just said it's really hard to not watch either of those episodes without kind of thinking of the other.
I have the same association. I know both of those episodes, Horror of Fang Rock, and I know the Lighthouse episode of The Goodies too, and they definitely merge in my head as well.
Yeah, there's something around with that. I think it had to do with the fact that they were shown in Australian TV. They were shown in the same kind of block.
They were. Well, it was The Goodies and Doctor Who, or the Doctor Who, The Goodies. I think there was an episode of Danger Mouse in between, and maybe you got an episode of Roger Ramjet afterwards, but it was every night after school.
Yeah. Awesome. So look, what was it then that initially, with all that kind of stuff that you kind of you're absorbing as you're growing up, what was it though that drew you to the filmmaking business, and how would you describe that journey?
I think it was watching Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, to be honest.
Yeah.
I seem to remember that was the first film I watched at a young age, where I was conscious of thinking about the people who made the film and thinking that looks like it would have been lots of fun to make. So I kind of feel like that's where I first started thinking about, the fact that people make films, and occasionally you watch a film and go, I wonder how they did that, which I never did prior to watching that film.
Yeah.
But I had friends at school, like one who sort of made films. So I remember I made a film with my parents' little Super 8 camera, using my Star Wars action figures and my Grayskull action figures, so my He-Man figures. So I did a little movie with them.
Yeah.
And there was a kid in my class who'd done a movie with all his Smurfs. So we just started making movies together. So it just kind of fell into it, like storytelling, and we liked putting ninjas in stuff and robots made out of cardboard and that kind of stuff. So it wasn't until just a few years ago really that I thought, why don't I try to make a feature? Used to just do back. You have to remember, I'm very old, so this is all pre-YouTube. So there was really, you couldn't really go anywhere with a film you make on your parents' Super 8 or your parents' camcorder, which is what we were doing. We used to get I'd bring my VCR around to his place and we'd plug them together with the RCA plugs, and that's how we edited and stuff.
Yeah.
So just a lifelong kind of hobby and passion, I suppose.
Yeah, cool. So look, one thing I wanted to touch on as well, though, was strangely Australia as a country has this great history of producing these genre films, right? There's a whole plethora of them out there. Which, if you're unfamiliar with it, go check this stuff out, because there's some gems I have to tell you about. And yet, there's never really been given much critical praise thrown its way, despite commercial success. What's your take on this, being somebody that plays in that field in genre filmmaking?
I have no idea. There are a lot of people in the do-it-yourself kind of land, or you used to call it guerrilla filmmaking and that kind of stuff. People tend to call it independent filmmaking now.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it's do-it-yourself filmmaking, so it's where you grab a camera and some people and work out how to make a film yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of people go for horror. I don't think there's a very big market for it here, to be honest. We don't buy a lot of horror films. I was talking to our sales agent who's managing Sheeple Massacre and this one, Tarnation.
Yep.
And he was saying he gets lots of films from Australia, but he rarely sells genre horror films to Australia.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think we don't kind of buy them, and it's a government funded kind of industry here too. So the only films with money are the government funded ones, and whatever I've never had any success getting funded from the government, and their interests are not this way, even though they might sort of go, it's genre, maybe it's commercial. I just don't think they've got their tastes just don't lean that way. So when they do choose a genre film to fund, it's not a good one, and it doesn't work, and then they go, well, genre film doesn't work. In a way, they don't know what they're doing when they move outside of their little specific niche.
Yeah, sure.
Well, they don't seem to know what they're doing anyway. Full stop. Sorry, Screen Australia. But
That's right.
that controls a lot of it, because there's really only big money for those films that are perceived by those guys as worth putting money into.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because there is as I said, you look back at Australian horror and sci-fi films. There's been some amazing films that have been made along the way, and they've all developed a cult status. a lot of it outside of Australia, as you said, but it's interesting that it's never really taken out here. And I'm wondering, we're supposedly going through a new horror boom at the moment, off the back of last year's success with things like Get Out and It making waves on the box office. You wonder whether that will make an impact over here or not. But it's interesting. It's great to see people like
you could have said that when Wolf Creek came out, but then they ignored Wolf Creek 2 critically and all that kind of stuff.
And yet,
it's just not in their DNA to really get it. I'm sure there'll be a big funded government horror film come out, but it'll be the wrong type. They'll fund a zombie film or something. 10 years too late.
Talk about pushing out a dead thing. There's a pun in there somewhere. But it is interesting. I find it. I live and breathe horror movies. So for me, I find that really hard to undertake. I'd love to kind of get a horror film festival up and running. I live up in the Blue Mountains in Australia, New South Wales, and I'd love to get something up here, but I don't think we've got the market for it because it's.
There is Monster Fest, which runs down here in Melbourne. Which is,
that's right. And they're doing the travelling sideshows as well. They're hitting the big key areas. And I'd love to have a chat with them and see if there is an avenue to do something up this way because it'd be really cool.
Definitely have a chat to them. I'm sure they'd be well into it.
Yeah. Look, let's talk more about your work. So, I want to start with From Parts Unknown, Fight Like a Girl. And the reason I want to start there is, and I know this kind of got officially kind of got the release after some of the other films, but it was actually one of your early works. But particularly, I think it marks an interesting theme with you in your movies. It does take a look at women's wrestling as part of that story journey or story structure. Did you have a lot of research into that area when you were putting pen to paper and then script to film in order to kind of get background in women's wrestling? Or?
I've always been a big fan of pro wrestling, WWE. So I've always thought it would be a cool idea to do an action horror movie with pro wrestler, and then I just thought it's probably even cooler if it's a female pro wrestler, just because. And we had one of the local wrestling promotions, PCW, Pro Championship Wrestling Entertainment, were around at the time. They're still around now as well, and they're still doing shows. But they helped us out. They helped us find some wrestlers who were in the film, but they also put Jenna, who played the lead role in that film. She went and did training with that because they run a little wrestling school where you can learn how to be a wrestler. She did that for about 9 weeks or something.
Wow! Okay.
Just to learn. So we involved the local scene and that kind of stuff. But that was a long time ago. That was good. That was good fun though. But I've always just been a pro wrestling fan. I thought it'd be cool to.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on from that, you then I want to talk about Murder Drone, which also interestingly took another look at a female-focused sport in roller derby. What was it that drew you to that as a topic?
I remember I've been thinking that if you remember the film The Warriors from the late 70s?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and that really struck me as a kid because I remember all the costumes. There was the baseball furies and the other guys, and there was one little gang on roller skates. Yeah. So you only see briefly in the subway. And what I had in mind was ripping off the Warriors, one night, but making the central gang basically roller derby themed. Yeah, yeah. So but after not ever writing that and kind of not really knowing how I was going to pull it together, somebody said, do something that's a bit easier to do with the no money scenario. So I thought, that's a slasher film. And then he said, and then put the roller derby girls in that. And I'm like, oh yeah. so that's how that came about. But then we went and got we went and got real roller derby girls. All the cast except for one or two were really roller derby players. Yeah. And we had people from teams all over the country came to be involved and that sort of stuff. So that was fun. It's just it gives you, especially when you're pitching to a niche audience in the first place. Gives it, it gave it an audience. Murder Drone got quite an audience because of the, probably not just in Melbourne in particular. It got a huge audience because of if you played roller derby, you pretty much knew someone who was in the film kind of thing, or someone who was involved in the film. But it was just it's you got to think of something interesting. It's we're not going to have we're not going to have too much spectacle in terms of high production value. So it's like, well, what can we do that other people with lots of money who are making films aren't doing? So yeah, you just think along those lines, I think.
Yeah. I really liked that film, and I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you. Like I found it. I actually found it really really enjoyable, and I watched it again recently in the lead up to our chat, and I was just like, yeah, I've forgotten actually how there's some really kind of really fun moments in it, you know.
It was not a feature film. I was going to originally do just five minute kind of skits, basically, which were going to go online.
Sure.
We're going to make them, and there's some vague thoughts in the back of my head that, like, if the roller derby crowd really like it, maybe we can compile them all together in a DVD. So there was never a complete story written for it. It was just really a bunch of scenes, because I was going to go from episode 1 to episode 5 to episode 7 and just pretend the others were missing and not explain it to anybody. But that's when I got in contact with the guys at Monster Pictures.
Yes.
And I don't know how they heard about it. I think someone in the film was working with someone who worked there, and so whatever. They kind of chased us, and then we were returning calls, playing phone tag, and we eventually got in touch with them. They just assumed it was a feature film.
Right.
So I just agreed with them. and then they were like, so when can you show us a cut? And I'm like, give me a couple of weeks. And then I just went and added a whole bunch of, like, montages to music and extended every scene as long as it could possibly go, and then it turned into a really short feature.
Yeah.
And there's an 8-minute opening title sequence.
That makes sense now, actually, yeah, because I, as I said, watching it recently, I was like, that was a long intro, without really kind of putting 2 and 2 together, you know. Yeah, cool. Something else that that's probably worth noting is that this was your first time working with somebody you work with quite regularly, or in a couple of other films down the track, with Daisy Masterman. You know how some directors do tend to gravitate to some of the same actors. You know, do you find working with her quite? Well, obviously you do if you kind of keep calling her back. But is there something about her that you find that you can in tune with your line of thinking?
She's not at all in tune. She hates these types of films. She doesn't like genre films. She would much rather be doing something serious and dramatic and like and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But she does love doing the physical stuff, which is surprising, because she's like not a physical person. But in Tarnation, she got to fall out of trees and all sorts of stuff. And in Sheborg, she got to jump into moving vans and get involved in fights and stuff.
Yeah.
She really enjoyed that. I mean, I've sort of, you know, they're do-it-yourself films, so like it's a cast and crew of volunteers at the end of the day. So to a certain extent, of course, you start to build a little group who are interested in doing that.
Yep.
If you know what I mean. Some people won't do it repeatedly. Some people will. Mm-hmm. But I do remember on Murderdrome, I'd met Daisy, I don't know, a year or two before we'd done Murderdrome, and sort of, you know, she wanted to get a part in a film, and eventually found it in Murderdrome. But I remember watching it back and thinking, oh, she's very underutilized.
Yeah.
Because she's very funny, basically. Like, I mean, I think she'd be a great comedian. She can do drama as well, but like she's just so naturally funny. I'm always trying to make her be funny. So that's when. So I wrote the role in Sheborg, the role she has in that, specifically for her, because I thought, no, we need to use her more. Yes. And then after Sheborg, I thought, it'd be really nice to get you to carry a film, which would be Tarnation.
Yeah.
And of course, moving forward into the next one, she's provided she's available, she'll be the lead for that as well. Cool. So no, I don't know. We do work together. I mean, we're really good. We're really good friends now. We talk just about every day, kind of stuff. So there's a connection there. But she's definitely not a fan of She's not a part of this world.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's interesting.
But I mean, she has a job voicing a character on Gwen Stefani's Cuckoo Harajuku Girls, which is a Nickelodeon cartoon.
Yeah.
Which would be in her 3rd or 4th season by now, and she's done. She was in the Bloodlines book trailers, another American thing.
Yeah.
So she does real acting as well.
Nice.
But no, she's just I find her very, very versatile, and she's very appealing on camera as well. And she's like, I find kind of give anything a go, which is important.
you really notice it in Tarnation. I mean, and we will get to Tarnation in a minute. But she's really good in that. Her presence is really strong, and like you said, enjoyable, and a good mix of humour and kind of drama thrown into that.
Yeah,
Cool.
she can do, like, she doesn't get the chance to do it because obviously there's not a lot of drama in any of my films, but she can turn on the drama really well.
Yeah.
Her comedic presence is so great.
Nice.
It's like, I just like pushing that.
I do want to talk about one of the key themes that runs through your work, and that's having strong female presence. How important is it to you to display these characters on film, and what is it, or has been, in what has been essentially a strong male-dominated world within the film business? It tends to be very kind of male-focused, and the tide is changing a little bit, but it seems with your films like you do allow the female to kind of show their strength.
Yeah, well, it wasn't any kind of conscious, I wasn't trying to do women any favours, I don't think. It was knowing I'm going into a film, making it with no money, it's going to be an action film or a pro wrestling film or a horror kind of film.
Yeah. Just
trying to think, how do I make it stand out? It's like, that was a way that would help it stand out, is like by sticking some chicks in lead roles, but like not. But they've all got male names, so I write them just as you would a guy. There's no differentiation, and just kind of helps the film be a bit more stand out a little bit more in the low budget kind of realm. So it's kind of a practical choice.
Yeah.
And I default as well. Like it changes a bit the way you write, and characters can be more interesting. Like I will default to she when I write a character instead of he, unless there's a reason for it to be a guy. And it just helps, without like doing anything revolutionary. It just helps you write a slightly different film to one that you would write if it was a he.
Yeah.
Basically, which and I think it's really difficult in the, when you haven't got any star power and your production values or whatever you can pull out of the back of your car and that kind of stuff. It really helps to have points of interest that you can be creative with, I suppose. So that, that's where it came from. I definitely wasn't being in any way political with it. I just thought it would help the films be better, basically.
Sure.
If that makes sense. On the flip side, though, I know the girls enjoy the chance to do fun roles instead of like the kind of boring role that doesn't get to do much on the side or isn't in it much. They get to do all the cool stuff like fire the crossbow or crash the car or be in the car chase or be in the fight. And it's not just a roll around on the ground pulling hair kind of fight. It's like proper fight. Things like so. Yeah, a lot of and they get to tell jokes and be funny and all that kind of stuff instead of being on the sidelines. So, but no, it's not a conscious, not any kind of feminist thing.
Your latest movie, Tarnation, which debuted at Monsterfest last year, it will be screening as part of their travelling sideshow in Sydney on Sunday, March 11th at 2:15 p.m. For those of you that might be listening to this beforehand, go and grab your tickets. I promise you, it's a great film. From my point of view, it felt like this roller coaster of a ride with obvious nods to the Evil Dead, and another common theme of yours, which has been demonic cults, which has cropped up, and as I said, in a couple of your movies. Can you tell us a little bit more about this film?
Yes. Well, I think I do know when I came to write it, I wrote it immediately after Sheborg Massacre. So, like when Sheborg was still in post and it was preparing to come out.
Yeah.
I do remember thinking I'd really like to do something on a smaller scale. There was a lot of people in Sheborg. There were a lot of different locations. There were ridiculous amounts of action scenes involving too many people. And I thought it'd be nice to do something where everyone's just in one place and there's only 2 or 3 people and, maybe we've got a boxing kangaroo. So I thought, okay, I'll do a cabin in the wood kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what motivated me to go write it. But then I also wanted, was another objective was to get Daisy to play the lead and to focus it all around one character and give Daisy a chance. Still not going to give her a serious role, but give her a chance to at least take the weight of a lead role from start to finish on a film, which you can do a bit more with as an actor, I suppose, even though you're still in a comedy and that kind of stuff. And then, it is, roller coaster is a good way to describe it because that's literally how I approached writing it, really. I was kind of like, well, what can happen now? And yeah, it does riff off Evil Dead Heat. It riffs off. I didn't specifically target any particular films. It's just that mishmash of films from the $10 for 10 movies per week section that's kind of in my head. I just threw in ideas as I went, and anything that kind of made sense. And I focused. Really, the storytelling is just all about the central character, Oscar. Yeah. And her journey into her own demented mind, kind of. And there's a speaking of another influence, I feel like there's a big the Bush, Monty Bush kind of vibe to Tarnation as well. Like,
of course, I so love the Monty Bush. Yes,
where there's that sort of weird, vaguely surreal.
Yep.
Is that actually a joke, or are you just being strange kind of humour? Which really suits me as well. So so those guys are in there as an influence too.
No, I totally get that 100%. Look, because there's, I noticed like even there's little Star Wars moments in that movie. I'm talking about where the lead character's hung upside down. There's a definite nod to Star Wars in there. Keep an eye out for people that watch it. Even small little things like the Jason mask hanging up in the background, and things like that. And as a horror movie nut, like these little things you're watching, you just think, I love it so much.
Well, a lot of that. It's great that you spotted it, and it seems like a design. But honestly, like the Jason mask is just hanging on my wall over here, which is where it was before we did Tarnation. And to dress the set, it was largely just grab what I've got, and let's hang it up somewhere in the cabin. So it's like all those little nods. But we did frame a few shots where it was like just in the corner, so you could see it and that kind of stuff. But it's just, it's meant to be fun. It's meant to be, I guess it's meant to be for people like you and me who are going to get a kick out of like going, I know what film that's from. So there's a lot of it. It's a very niche kind of audience, but it is fun if you get it. People who don't get it, obviously, they don't get as much out of the film, to be honest. But you make it for an audience of one, and hope that maybe there's several more who dig it. Away you go.
We've said that you've said this already about how you're working in a very low budget territory in your films. But with that, you do have these kind of like really gruesome and bloody special effects along the way, which obviously you need in order to kind of satiate people's bloodlust when they go to these movies. But they also are probably the most expensive kind of part of your filmmaking process, one would believe. So what has been, do you think, your toughest task to pull off when you've been creating these movies? What do you think's been your big obstacle?
I haven't. This is the honest answer, but it's very, very boring.
Yeah.
The most difficult thing every single time is scheduling.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's casting for volunteers, so like you can't necessarily get everyone together on a Saturday, especially actors, because that's generally when they're working. So that is by far and away the hardest thing. Like in terms of, there's always a way to fudge a special effect, even if it's edited around it. And obviously the tone and the nature of my films kind of means if the special effect turns out bad, that's okay, because it's part of the joke. So which is deliberate as well, to be honest. Like part of the reason the tone of the films is so tongue-in-cheek and stuff, it's because I know we're not always going to be able to do what's written in the script. So it's like, well, we can't just have a terrible effect in there and try to pretend it works. So it's like, so it's that's not such a huge challenge. And we've got this guy Anthony Hatfield, who's a set builder, and he's our art director, and he generally constructs the special effects too. And he's really good at what he does. But like he built the cabin, for instance, in Tarnation out of a chicken coop. And that was, we didn't have to spend a hell of a lot of money on it. He found things, and he built a floor that raises up and down for when the demon sinks through the rug. So that was in the set and stuff like that.
Nice.
So a little bit of time and ingenuity, you can kind of, and a tiny bit of money, you can work your way around most of those. But scheduling, there's nothing you can do, because like people have to be able to pay their rent and feed themselves. So it's like getting the whole crew and all the cast you need available at the same time when the location's available can be pretty challenging. So boring answer, but that's definitely the truth. Scheduling is the hardest.
I do kind of like to. I mean, you're saying a boring answer, but it kind of isn't really, because anyone that's interested in this filmmaking process, and that's part of what I want to do, is talk to people like yourself about the nitty gritty that goes into kind of getting these things up and running, you know, and realistically what it takes for it to work. I mean, something that struck me though is that you seem to be a bit of a. I was trying to look this up in the background, but I don't know if I got it up to be accurate or not. But you seem to be a bit kind of a bit of a guru, churning these films out. Kind of, you're doing on average one a year, isn't that? Does that seem about right?
This sort of, like I say, I started writing Tarnation while Sheborg was still in post-production.
Yeah.
And then we had already shot the majority of Tarnation before Sheborg was even released on DVD.
Okay.
So they're not necessarily coming out that fast, but it takes up, 6 months or longer from the time you finish one film to the time the next comes out.
Yeah, yeah.
So they feel like they fall on top of each other almost a year apart.
Yeah.
But to me, there's like Tarnation we shot it wasn't even last year, it was 2016, and it's just coming out now.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
So that was like a year ago we finished shooting that. And, I haven't shot anything since. We're just getting ready for the next one now.
Yeah.
But so it takes about a year, 18 months, I think, from start to finish to make one. So there was a bit of like Murderdrome and From Parts Unknown, because you sort of mentioned it before.
Yeah.
I'd shot From Parts Unknown first, but there were issues, including some personal life issues in the background, which made me put From Parts Unknown on the shelf.
Yep.
Then went out and shot Murderdrome, which is, remember, it's just meant to be a short film, not a whole feature film.
Yeah.
So went out and shot that. Once I got my life back together, it was like, go out, shoot that, finish From Parts Unknown, But from Murderdrome kind of accelerated, became a feature, got released, and then, by that time I'd finished From Parts Unknown, so it was I had them both ready at the same time, so it was literally kind of like, well, here's two, release one, so there was a bit of catch-up involved. But they are pretty much sort of dropping out every year or two.
Yeah. I mean, that's good to see that you're able, considering we are talking about this low budget kind of genre that or field that you're working in. It's good to see that you're able to kind of keep producing that out there, and there is a market. And look, I'm thankful that Monster Fest, the guys at Monster Pictures, have been able to hook us up to chat with together, and it. I have to praise them in order to kind of, not just for that, but they are one of the key areas that's really supporting this genre in Australia. And
I think that they're about the only distributor out there who's really doing it.
Yeah.
Not just through DVD releasing, which to be honest is difficult to get DVDs sold in this day and age. They're pretty much gone. But just Monster Fest and the travelling sideshow, it's great to make a movie like this and be able to premiere it in a cinema with a proper cinema screening. And, it's not
Absolutely.
They're not projecting off a DVD or anything. You make the whole DCP. It's in 5.1. It's in a big cinema. It's great for everyone who works on something like this to be able to see the film the way you're meant to watch films.
Yeah. And
Monster provide all of that. So they are really supportive.
Yeah.
And they do what they can to keep a bit of a scene alive, because it's, I don't know, if people don't see the films, there's no point making the films.
No, that's right. And we want to see them on the big screen. We come from. I mean, I know that there's people out there that say that it's a bit of a dying art form, but for me, there is definitely something about going to see it on a big screen. That's what it's about.
Yeah. So, no, there is. I mean, I don't know whether it's. I don't think people do still enjoy movies on the big screen. It's just the convenience of binge watching the latest whatever at home is. I mean, I do it myself. There's heaps of films that I don't go to the cinema to see because I can watch it here.
Yeah. That's right. I get it. All right, look. Let's. We've glossed over it a little bit, but let's talk about your latest endeavour, which it's part of a Kickstarter campaign. Is that correct? Through Kickstarter?
Oh yeah, it's on Possible.
Oh,
but same theory, crowdfunding campaign. Yeah, we're trying to raise. I have the first 4 films. They basically cost me about $10,000. That's with your cast and crew of volunteers. You end up spending about $10,000. Start to finish to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have $10,000, so we decided, I don't know, this is film number 5. We might turn around and ask people who've been following us whether they can pre-buy the film and maybe a T-shirt or all the usual stuff you stick on a Kickstarter and see if we can get $10,000 together. Then we can go and make one more and get it going. So yes, we have if you go to novastarfilm.com, all the rewards are there, and there are some fun ones. You can make me sing the theme from Red Dwarf, for instance, or you can get Daisy to tell you a joke, or you can pre-order the film and the T-shirts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll definitely put a link in the footnotes of this as well.
Awesome.
So so people can check that out. Any other clues as to the theme of Nova Star? I don't think we've mentioned it, but Nova Star, other than Red Wolf?
Yes. Otherwise, that will be meaningless to people. It's a retro sci-fi, so it's an 80s styled sci-fi movie. If you've watched a lot of Blake Seven or Red Dwarf, even. You kind of get the vibe we're going for there, and the story revolves around Mac, who will be played by Daisy. Mac, who cleans the toilets aboard this majestic spaceship called the Nova Queen, and her little sidekick maintenance robot Spanners, and they, while all the high and mighty are having their intergalactic war above them, they somehow find themselves stuck in the middle of it all and have to save the galaxy from an evil space queen who's going to flush the entire cosmos out through a black hole. So, they have to use what they know from sanitation to save the universe.
Yeah, nice.
so sci-fi action comedy. I want to use, do a little bit of miniature photography for the spaceships and do it old school, so like that retro kind of charm to it and all that.
Yeah, nice. That sounds really cool. I'd like to see that. That kind of reminds me, not the theme, but when that film Moon came out with Sam Rockwell, they were used kind of that kind of stuff as well, which I thought was a cool little nod to that genre too, although be it in a different way. And yeah, I love the whole Blake Seven stuff. Again, the sci-fi guru of ours, and I'll name him Anthony Yee. He keeps talking to me about Blake Seven, and he got me to watch. I'd never seen it.
Really?
Yeah. Criminal as that sounds, and he got me to watch one the other day, and all I could say was the costumes. They looked like they were wearing brown turds or these big things. I was like, "What are you?" I was aware of the show. I mean, I grew up with Doctor Who more than Seven. So I was kind of aware of the similar kind of genre field that we were working with, but I was just like, "What the hell are you making me watch?" I
love Blake Seven. But big focus on costumes and
cool.
Dodgy sets and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, we should probably mention a name that's come up quite a lot of through your films. Jenna Cosgrove as well has been behind a lot of the kind of costume, kind of design stuff. Is that correct?
She worked first on She-Borg, and she was assisting in the costume. She didn't. She assisted all over She-Borg. Actually, she operated the boom mic for a lot of scenes and that kind of stuff as well. And Tarnation, she designed all the costumes, and she's producing Nova Star.
Yeah, cool.
With me, and has worked with Rachel Lee Perks, who sort of makes the custom costumes, and she's been working with us in She-Borg as well.
Okay, cool. No, it's good to mention the people behind those little areas, and the name rings a bell to me as well. I don't know whether that's just from maybe it was from watching She-Borg a while ago, but I just kind of went, oh, that name sounds familiar. Yeah, cool. All right, so that's probably us for this session. Just a reminder for people that are listening: do go to novastar.com.au. Did you say for
Novastarfilm?
Novastarfilm.com.
Novastarfilm.com.
Go check that out and put a little bit behind it. Even if it's a small thing, it's important to kind of support the genre that we love.
No, absolutely. Well, a small bit makes a big difference because it's only $10,000 we're looking for.
Yeah.
So $10 is still a reasonable step towards that goal. Absolutely.
And along with that, go and check out Tarnation, which is, once again, just to let people know that might be listening to this beforehand, it's screening as part of Monster Fest Travelling Sideshow in Sydney on Sunday, March 11th at 2:15 p.m. Thanks so much for talking with me, Daniel. It's been an absolute pleasure having a chat, and I wish you all the success that Tarnation brings and Nova Star around the corner. Can't wait to see how that develops along the way.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.